I have two. They're both local, obviously, but one of them, I was already kind of in the vein of this, but Mike asked it maybe off air yesterday. What if Josh Hamilton had stayed straight?
Oh my gosh!
If he had, healthy and not on drugs.
Yeah. If he had walked the clean path his entire life, or even like just was able to be that guy, because Mike, when we watched him, we saw a great guy for a very short period of time. I think in like Major League Baseball timeline, if he'd had a Mike Trout type career, would he have been healthy longer? Would his body have been able to keep up with it? And because what we saw was a spectacular player. And I think that, Kevin, all your prejudices, is that the right word? Aside from that, like you can always say like that was one of the best baseball players we got to see here in Texas ever. But we only got to see him for a short period.
Talking to people that played against or with Mike Trout and with or against Josh Hamilton, will say that Josh Hamilton actually had more talent than Mike Trout. He might have been, I know this sounds weird, but he might have been the most talented person God ever created on this earth to play baseball. But because of getting hurt and then getting on drugs and alcohol and everything that happened to him, Josh Hamilton is not really talked about in baseball at all. Like right now, I think if you bring up to a lot of people Josh Hamilton, they'd go, oh, wait, like, okay, yeah, I remember who
that home run derby guy, yeah.
But like, I think that Josh Hamilton might have been in the conversation as we had the top 100 list. If he probably would have never been a Texas Ranger,
right?
Yeah.
But he probably would have, ended up being like a New York Yankee. Choppy would have said he probably would have gone from Tampa to the New York Yankees or something like that during his career. But would we be talking about, is he the greatest player in the last 50 years of baseball? Is he the greatest player of all time?
Look,
if it would have been a normal life.
I think that is a very fair question. Like you said, I don't like Josh Hamilton as a human whatsoever. But, and this is what I wanted to double check on, is before he got into Major League Baseball, like actually got to the majors, he was suspended in 5 different seasons for drug issues. And think about it. He still got to Major League Baseball and was the MVP and finished top 7 2 other times between 27 and 31. Like, what would have happened if you would have had the front 5 years of that career? Like, not adding on the last 5 years, but then again, maybe his body wouldn't have broken down the way, obviously, I don't think it would have, but what would have happened in those first 5 years? His first full, complete season in Major League Baseball, he had 32 home runs, 130 RBIs, and was 7th in the MVP rankings at 27 after 5 drug suspensions. Like, that's amazing. If none of that would have happened, I don't doubt whatsoever that you could tack on another 2 MVPs and then a lot more top 10 finishes, way more All-Star game appearances, and a different perspective. And
the dude was an athletic freak in center field.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And now he just, and he was great. And he was great during his time with the Rangers here. But for a lot of people, he represents like somebody pissing away their talent because they're like, well, I'm going to do this instead.
The other one, like this is, you can go multiple times in his career and point to, well, what if, Dez had caught it? But I will go all the way back to, what if Tony Romo had not fumbled the snap? And that was so early in his career. There's still a road they had to get through. Like the Bears, I think, ended up the Seahawks lost to the Bears. The Bears then went on and beat New Orleans. They scored like 39 points, and then they lost to the Colts. But had the Cowboys been able to go to the next round and maybe beat the Bears or maybe whatever, and Tony Romo ends up getting a Super Bowl that early in his career, is he looked at differently, and are the Cowboys different for the rest of his career there?
The interesting thing about that is,
and does Bill Parcells stay?
Yeah,
that is true. I always thought about it from the perspective of the next year, in 2007, because I always kind of thought that 06 seemed like logically the faltering thing that drove you to greatness, right?
Okay, yeah.
Because that next year they were awesome, and it really sucks because the team that they lost to in the playoffs won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You beat the Giants, you get to host Green Bay in that NFC Championship game, and then you go up against the then undefeated Patriots. So then all of a sudden, is Tony Romo the more competent version of Eli Manning? Like, is he the guy? Because think about it, that kicks Eli Manning out of the Hall of Fame. He doesn't make the Hall of Fame now. And like, it's Tony Romo. Like, well, I mean, he lost to Romo, so what can you do? Like I would be really fascinated if people were like, well, Tom Brady lost to Tony Romo, but it's Tony Romo, so what can you do? Instead, instead you'd be like, he lost to who? Yeah. Eli? How the hell did that happen? That's a really great one. And
there are a ton of good ones coming in on the fan text.
You said local. I wanted to throw out at least one more local, but
if Steve DeBerg stayed in Dallas? That's a great question.
We would have won every Super Bowl, I think, is the answer.
We could have stayed drafted Joe Montana.
That's true. What if the Mavericks would have won the title in 2006? Because then Dirk's 28. And he's peak Dirk, and everybody wants to come here. Because by the time he won the title, like, he wasn't at the part where you're like, well, we can go and build around him. At 28 years old, the only knock people had is like, oh, I don't know if this Euro can win a championship. Well, if you win a championship, and then I wonder, do they go out the next year and still whip everybody's ass, but don't fear playoff failure again like the year before? Like, do they run through Golden State even though they're a garbage matchup? Because they're like, who cares? We're the best team in the NBA. Like, I have always wondered about that as well.